You're standing outside a house. It's a house similar to what you grew up in. 3 bedrooms, a little yard, maybe a 2-car garage your dad was very proud of. Nothing fancy. Best part? They bought this with one salary, from a job at a factory, a job with a pension, a job with health insurance, a job that could, on its own, support a family and a mortgage and a vacation to somewhere decent every other summer. And now it's your turn. You look it up on Zillow, $740,000. Your parents paid off their mortgage in 17 years. You can't even afford the down payment. You close the app. For most of modern history, the American economy, and economies like it, worked on a relatively simple promise. You worked hard, maybe went to college, got a decent job, bought a house, retired with a little something to show for it. Economists called the people who did this the middle class, and for most of the 20th century, that group was enormous. In 1971, 61% of American adults were middle class. That meant the economy, whatever its flaws, had a center of gravity. A huge mass of people who weren't poor, weren't rich, but were stable. They spent money, which kept businesses open, which kept people employed, which kept the whole thing spinning. Here's what that number is today. A majority, barely, and it's been shrinking every single decade since. The question to ask is, what happened? Where did all the middle-income people go? In the depths of the pandemic, an anonymous account on Twitter asked a simple question. Why is no one talking about a K recovery? The account called itself Ivan the K. Nobody knew who Ivan was, but Ivan had a theory. While economists argued about whether the post-COVID rebound would look like a V, a U, an L, optimistic shapes, pessimistic shapes, Ivan suggested something darker. What if the recovery didn't have one direction? What if it had two? Draw the letter K. Look at its 2 right-hand lines. One goes up and to the right. One goes down and to the right. They start from the same point. Then they diverge. They never come back together. That, Ivan suggested, is what was actually happening. Here's the K-shaped recovery in concrete terms. The top third of American earners, people who worked from home, who owned assets, whose wealth lives in portfolios and property, came out of the pandemic richer, much richer. The stock market hit record after record. Home values surged. Their net worth ballooned while not doing much. The bottom third? Service workers, hourly workers, people who had to show up in person or not get paid at all. They lost jobs, lost hours, fell behind on rent. The stimulus payments kept them afloat for a while. And then the money ran out, inflation hit, and the debt they'd taken on at low pandemic rates started costing them a lot more. And the middle? The middle got quietly squeezed from both sides. Today, the top 10% of American earners are responsible for 49% of all consumer spending. This means that half the economy runs on the spending of 1/10 of the population. The other half is carrying the remaining 90%. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, calls this the illusion of resilience. GDP looks fine, the headline numbers look fine, but pull back the curtain and 2/3 of Americans are struggling. They're buying groceries on buy now, pay later. They're crowding into Walmart and Dollar General. They're searching Ralph Lauren Christmas on TikTok and then looking for the $12 knockoff version. We are mistaking the success of the few for the health of the many. The aggregate numbers aren't lying. They're just only telling one side of a very divided story. This didn't happen overnight. The K didn't appear out of nowhere in 2020. COVID just made it visible. The lines had been splitting for decades, mainly due to 3 forces. First, assets versus wages. In the 1970s, something quietly broke. Wages for middle-income workers started to stagnate. Not collapse, just stop growing at the rate they once had. Meanwhile, asset prices kept climbing. If you owned things, stocks, property, a business, you got richer. If you sold your time for a salary, you mostly stayed still. The result, 50 years later, is this. The top 10% hold over 70% of all wealth in America. The bottom 50% hold about 2.5%. And the primary wealth-building tool for the middle class, the family home, is now so expensive that many people can't even get started. Home equity built the middle class. A $740,000 starter home is dismantling it. Second, who got the money? In 2020, the US government and Federal Reserve injected trillions into the economy to prevent total collapse. It worked. But the Cantillon effect, an old economic principle that says new money benefits whoever receives it first, meant that most of the real money went to large institutions, banks, and asset holders. Small businesses closed. Corporate giants absorbed them. The Fed's historically low interest rates for over a decade before that had already done the same thing. Cheap money made it easy for the wealthy to borrow and buy more assets. It made it easy for private equity to acquire hospitals, housing developments, apartment buildings, and local businesses. It turned ownership from a path to wealth into a moat that kept others out. Third, the hollowing of the middle. There used to be a concept called the career ladder. You started at the bottom, learned the job, got promoted, became the person you once reported to. That ladder had rungs, lots of them. It created the middle class as a destination, a place you could reliably end up through steady work. Somewhere along the way, corporations decided the middle rungs were expensive. Middle management got gutted. Entire layers of mid-level roles, analysts, coordinators, junior managers, were eliminated in wave after wave of efficiency drives. Consulting firms wrote the reports, executives took the bonuses, and the people in those roles went somewhere else. The K was already drawing itself. Then something arrived that threatens to finish the job. Here is a fact that Dario Amodei, the CEO of one of the most powerful AI companies on the planet, said out loud, in public, to lawmakers in Washington. AI could eliminate half of all entry-level white-collar jobs within 5 years. He called it a possible white-collar bloodbath. The CEO of an AI company, calling his own industry's product a white-collar bloodbath. Lawmakers nodded. Nothing happened. This is the part of the story where the instinct is to say, but technology always creates more jobs than it destroys. The Industrial Revolution, the Internet, every wave of automation has ultimately produced more work, not less. That argument is worth taking seriously. It might be right. Historically, it has been. AI is already creating new roles. AI engineers, prompt specialists, automation architects. The median salary for an AI role in early 2025 was over $156,000. But here's the thing. Those new jobs require a very specific, very expensive skill set. They're not replacing the jobs being lost one for one. They're replacing 50 of them with one. And the people who held those 50 jobs don't automatically become AI engineers. A 48-year-old business analyst at a mid-sized bank doesn't pivot into machine learning because IBM decided AI can now handle his entire department. In January 2025, professional services job openings hit their lowest level since 2013, a 20% year-over-year drop. 40% of white-collar job seekers that year failed to get a single interview, not a single one. Hiring for positions paying over $96,000 a year hit a decade low. And this is striking at exactly the wrong people, at exactly the wrong time. These aren't minimum wage workers. These are the people who were supposed to be on the upward arm of the K. Accountants, analysts, marketing managers, paralegals, the professional class, the last remaining wide stratum of the middle class. The steam engine took a century to reshape the labor market. ChatGPT hit 100 million users in 2 months. The pace of this disruption is unlike anything we have a playbook for. And the people it's hitting hardest are the ones who were told, their entire lives, that education and a good office job was the answer. It was the ticket. Do the right things, study hard, get the degree, get the job, and you'll be fine. Increasingly, that seems to not be the case anymore. Let's talk about where the K goes from here, because the K isn't static, it's actively accelerating. Bank of America analysts looked at the data in early 2026 and suggested the K might not even be the right shape anymore. They proposed an E, 3 downward arms, lower income, middle income, and now an increasing share of higher income households, all feeling the squeeze in different ways, while the very top continues to float upward, disconnected from the rest. The top tenth of 1% has seen a 60% increase in their share of wealth since 1989. Not their wealth, their share of all wealth. Meanwhile, the bottom 90% of Americans hold just 7% of stock market wealth. When the market hits records, as it has repeatedly, most of the country watches it happen through a window. This is what the hollowing of the middle class actually looks like. Not a dramatic collapse, not a sudden crash, a slow, grinding divergence. Two lines pulling apart, one heading somewhere bright, one heading somewhere darker. And in the middle, the place that was supposed to be safe, less and less room to stand. Economists worry about what happens to an economy when the middle empties out. Consumer spending, which drives roughly 70% of GDP, requires a mass of people with enough disposable income to actually spend. When that mass thins out, you become dependent on a small group of very wealthy people to keep the whole engine running. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because in 2005, analysts at Citigroup, one of the largest banks on Earth, wrote an internal report for their wealthiest clients. It was titled Plutonomy: Buying Luxury, Explaining Global Imbalances. And in it, they described something they had noticed. The world, they wrote, was dividing into two blocks. The plutonomy, their word, and the rest. Economies like the US, the UK, and Canada had become so dominated by the spending and wealth of the very rich that, in their words, there was no such thing as the average consumer anymore. The middle, in their analysis, was simply no longer economically relevant enough to model. They were not alarmed by this. They were excited by it. Their recommendation to investors was to buy shares in companies that catered to the very wealthy. Luxury goods, private banks. The thesis, stated plainly, the rich are the economy now. Invest accordingly. A follow-up report in 2006 was titled Revisiting Plutonomy: The Rich Getting Richer. The analysts noted that their wealthy clients were, quote, in great shape. They advised investors not to worry about global economic imbalances because in a plutonomy, the rich absorb so much of the economy that their behavior alone determines the aggregate numbers. What's happening with middle-income households, the implication ran, is noise. Citigroup later attempted to have both reports removed from the internet. They did not fully succeed. And 4 years after writing that the rich were the only consumers who mattered, Citigroup collapsed. It required a $45 billion government bailout to survive, paid for, in the most literal sense, by all the people they had declared irrelevant. The economy cannot run forever on the spending of people wealthy enough to be Citigroup's private clients. That is not a moral argument. It is a structural one. When the middle empties out, you are left with an engine that has lost most of its fuel and a small group of analysts somewhere writing reports about which yacht companies to invest in while the tank runs dry. You're still standing outside that house. Between you and me, the house isn't the point. The house is just the symbol. What it represents is the idea that stability is achievable, that a regular life, not a glamorous one, not an extraordinary one, can be built and sustained through regular work. That idea is what's actually at stake. The sprinklers come on. Somewhere down the street a dog is barking. Life is completely normal out here. And that's the thing about the K. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like a crisis from the outside. It just feels like a house you can't afford, a job that disappeared, a promise that quietly stopped being kept. One unremarkable Tuesday at a time.